The idea of a canon, or any form of list, is both a meaningless as well as an obsessive endeavour. I know I share the sentiment of many others in resolving the definitive list of anything, particularly when it comes to a categorisation of the greatest pieces in something I care deeply about. I've put it upon myself to attempt to create my own list of the films that I believe to be the greatest. And with any list of this kind, there are always self-imposed rules and defining precisely what each person creating each list means by greatest. But if I were to overthink, this list would never be made. Whatever the thought process was, these were the films that clearly, somewhere, resonate with me at my deepest level. For all I know, I could organise the exact same list in a year's time and every entry could be different. However, I shall commit to my claim and say that these are my 30 greatest films of all time. Innumerable masterpieces have been left off this list simply due to space, and all films that have currently been displayed, sadly, were cut just short. Thank you, and I hope this list ends up finding a purpose. If you're anything like us, chances are you recognise the power that art holds. It shaped many of our lives, which is why we aim to continually sing its praise and importance in the culture. But could art ever impact your daily life? We've all seen how tumultuous the economy of investing can be. Stocks, bonds, and the housing market are continually failing, and most people are disinterested in investing in that which they don't care about. This is why I'm excited to introduce our sponsor, Masterworks. Investing has become a necessity for financial freedom, so why not invest in a market you already know and love? Masterworks is an award-winning investment platform that allows you to invest in shares of contemporary art. For decades, high net worth investors have curated art collections partially as an investment. The value of a masterpiece can transcend time and place. With Masterworks, you can choose from many of your favourite artists, household names like Picasso, Banksy, and Kaws. Contemporary art prices have outpaced the S&P 500 by 131% over the last 26 years. And the very timeless nature of art allows for diversifying any portfolio. Masterworks' last 3 sales have delivered 17.8%, 21.5%, and 33% net returns to investors. Offerings have sold out as quickly as 14 minutes, and new members are signing up every day. Over 550,000 people have signed up so far, and demand is growing as we speak. Cinematography subscribers can skip the waitlist at the special link in the description. Number 30. Oldboy, directed by Chan-wook. If we were to simply judge the medium of cinema solely as a narrative-based medium, then Oldboy would remain as highly resonant a piece as film could achieve. A man is mysteriously kidnapped and kept alive for 15 years, alone in a room. His torture is that of a totalitarian kind. He remains fed, groomed, even with access to television and the goings-on of the outside world. He's alive, yet is anything but living. This is until an unexplainable, almost miraculous circumstance dictates that he's to be released from his confinement. He's given an opportunity not to find out who did this to him, but the grand question of why. And perhaps, like many things, some are just not meant to be known. This gripping mystery thriller narrative is the propelling factor of Oldboy, and it's what most people are going to find its most fascinating aspect. Though it takes something more than a great story to claim the mantle of one of the greatest films of all time.
내가 이겼으니까 약속대로 이제 죽어라.
I have to comment on the transgression Oldboy has of the great tradition, the immemorial storytelling of the tragedy. Part of Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy, the yearning for retribution is felt with such force in Oldboy, it's hard not to support our protagonist Oh Dae-soo's quest for answers via any means necessary. The revenge tale most aptly related to Oldboy is the tale of Oedipus the King, yet its notions of utilising the primal storytelling tools of Greek tragedy to fit into modern cinema are nothing short of brilliant. Number 30. Oldboy, directed by Park Chan-wook. The mastery of mise-en-scène delivers an ostentatious and almost melodramatic aura that swallows the film whole. Odesu is animalistic, the complete embodiment of vengeance, resulting in operatic scenes such as the hallway fight that flood the frame with his overwhelming fervour. Oldboy speaks to us like a legend or a myth that lingers through time. Its hyper-stylized world forces us to watch its brutal levels of violence while elevating them to a transcendental level. Just as we perceive the stories of vengeance from the Greeks, the depictions of revenge in Oldboy are not intended to simply be depicted solely as personal matters to the characters. They are vessels that represent all-encompassing facets of the human condition. Their sorrow is the sorrow of all humanity, as is their hatred, their desire, and their love. The catharsis that's reached upon the finale of Oldboy is a feeling so unique. The credits roll and we gaze over a mountainous landscape, left with a feeling that everything is finally over and we know that there is nothing more to be said, yet there's something missing in your soul. You don't feel content, but you don't feel sadness either. It's something in between, and that is where Oldboy succeeds most, from its use of hyper-real segments to an unreliable narrator, from slice-of-life realism to operatic grandiosity. Oldboy is a film that exemplifies the modern concept of a legend, to run the gamut of human emotion at its highest stake and emerge out the other end. Perhaps it may not be a direct lesson for humanity, but such a deep understanding of our emotional journeys must quantify a mastery of the art.
아니, 그 새끼 잡아 죽인 다음에.
Number 29. Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, directed by F.W. Murnau. When I think of Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, I think of an ode to life. Murnau's silent masterpiece is a film that begins on a contentious premise. A man's desperation for an escape from the life he's grown to resent decides he must murder his wife. This notion alone would make a story's subject almost instantaneously irredeemable, yet Sunrise manages to achieve an almost miraculous redemption for our characters. The first act of the film follows this heart-wrenching struggle of the two characters whom we spend the entirety of the film with, and within the film's first half an hour, Murnau presents the picturesque pastoral paradise, which by night transforms into a playground of the damned. Beautifully shot, and we see the great emotional depth that our two characters carry with them, one filled with love, the other tortured by dread. Though the most incredible aspect of Sunrise lies not in the turnaround of its climax. In regards to narrative structure, Sunrise's primary conflict is resolved much sooner than we may anticipate. It seems as though by the halfway point of the film, the resentment and anguish that was so present has been cast away. It shouldn't work, but for the film's remainder, it's not the undoing of what has been taken for granted, but it's the resurgence of our protagonist's love of life. What we witness throughout the majority of Sunrise is two people displaying the sheer exhilaration, not of falling in love, but merely to be in love. Sequences of taking photos, enjoying food, dancing, the simplest gestures heightened to the completely joyous experience of what it is to simply be alive, to be two humans. Appropriate for the film's title, Sunrise takes on a song-like structure. It doesn't take the minutiae of daily life and show us how nice it is. Murnau's filmmaking shows the impressionistic sensations of all emotion, and he sings them out loud. His danger is brooding and murderous, wherein even the literal language of the film begins to sink like our protagonist's vengeful desires. And in the same breath, our expressions of love teleport us to the heavens where nothing else matters. The initial redemption that occurs in Sunrise asserts the power of one another's love, but in an incredible feat of storytelling, our two characters must brave the very power of nature itself, putting their love to the ultimate test. Yet as we watch these characters grow, we watch as their love has overpowered everything it has encountered thus far. It's become the most important thing in their world. Sunrise, a song of two humans, thus creates a redemption for all life, as if just life itself is beautiful enough to redeem all sin. To watch this film is to feel a deep love for the life that you live at this very moment. And as the sun rises, we're reminded of the majesty of being human. Number 28, Citizen Kane, directed by Orson Welles. How does one discuss Citizen Kane without divulging into cliches? You can't. However, in this one instance, cliché and contrivance should be permitted, because the obvious statements that you can and will inevitably make about Citizen Kane exist for a reason. Citizen Kane remains the most influential film of all time. It's almost an objective truth at this point. When learning about the language of film, you can learn everything you need to know about framing a scene, pacing, character, montage, all from Citizen Kane. Because what people perhaps neglect most when talking about Citizen Kane is explaining its inescapable importance within the realm of cinema. Cinema in 1941 was still in many ways fighting to assert itself as a medium that could stand alongside high literature. And even though great film theorists such as Abel Gance and Sergei Eisenstein had furthered the discourse of the form, there was still the barrier of its emergence as a unique form of storytelling. But Citizen Kane seemed to change that. The density of Citizen Kane's narrative is an incredible feat. In 2 hours, we learn of a boy that was born into a poor family, and watch how he morphs into a newspaper tycoon, the growth and disintegration of his marriage, the perception of the myriad of those closest to him, until he becomes a reclusive old man leaving the world with a mysterious whisper. It's a perfect screenplay premise, centering around one of the most emblematic and transformative performances an actor has ever put on film, with Orson Welles as Charles Foster Kane.
Now, however, I have something more than a hope. And Jim Geddes has something less than a chance.
And though the story of Citizen Kane is a fascinating character study, it's its methodology that remains the shining jewel in this box of treasures. The stories within stories, the flashbacks, the non-linearity, its play with the passages of time, and all shot by Greg Toland with some of the most magnificent photography that's ever been shot in cinema. The way space is used in this film, every frame tells us something about the characters, their relationships to one another, and is ultimately just a spectacle of cinematic creativity. I can't talk about Citizen Kane and add any additional depth. Everyone has to watch this film. And if you don't come out realising what a spectacular achievement in the world of cinema this is, then you need to watch it again. Most people still regard Citizen Kane as the greatest film of all time, and it would be difficult to dissuade them. So why is it not higher? While I still hold one conviction in regards to Citizen Kane not being the greatest film of all time. Citizen Kane was the only film that Wells made under RKO, and there he had full creative control. But if he had creative control over his follow-up film, The Magnificent Ambersons, and the studio hadn't altered the final cut, then that undoubtedly would have been the greatest film that Orson Welles ever made. But for now, I'll make do with Citizen Kane.
I expect to lose $1 million next year. You know, Mr. Thatcher, at the rate of $1 million a year, I'll have to close this place in 60 years.
Number 27. My Dinner with Andre, directed by Louis Malle. Show, don't tell. This is the first rule you hear about filmmaking, but rules are meant to be broken. So what could be a better example of this than a film which is nothing more than two people having dinner and talking? That's the premise. Two friends meet and discuss one another's lives, and where one character, Andre, recites his grand and mystical experiences, his artistic, immaterial lifestyle, the other man at the table, Wally, discusses a simpler, more subdued life that he leads, and we sit and we listen.
Who am I? Why am I here? Where do I come from? And where am I going? But instead of applying them to a role, you apply them to yourself.
To speak about My Dinner with Andre would lead to levels of irony that I'm not ready to explore here. Essentially, I would just get in the way. For the only thing that occurs in this film is the conversation. Two friends sit and have a conversation, and that is it. However, I hope that in saying that this is one of the greatest films of all time can help get across the importance and impact of that conversation. The great thing about My Dinner with Andre is that it covers a diverse array of topics. One moment the talk explores theatre, then it explores modernity, then travelling the world, friendship. It flows and piques interest the way any good conversation does. Some things we directly relate to and can comprehend, but many of them we don't have a direct connection with. And yet we learn quite intimately the life philosophies that these two men employ, and as they begin to challenge and question one another's choices, the resulting dialogues are incredibly resounding ideas for us, the viewers. The film is a war of words, with nothing at stake other than where these topics may take us next. Explaining what's discussed in My Dinner with Andre is tantamount to spoiling the entire experience. It's a meditative piece with far more in common with a play than with cinema, and yet it simply belongs inside the film frame. Andre and Wally in many ways represent our inner voice, whereas one says that we should strive to throw away and be spontaneous and everything will work out, the other says how life is about the simple pleasures, and if you can be happy with what you have, then why ask for anything more?
I mean, why is it necessary to have more than this, or to even think about having more than this? I mean, I don't really know what you're talking about. I mean, I know what you're talking about. I don't really know what you're talking about.
And they are both correct, for the film gives time for them to expound on these grand monologues, to defend their ideals and challenge the status quo. So even though whoever is watching may have no affinity with Andre's perspective on spiritualism, we begin to respect both ways of living. And ultimately, that's what the film is. A meditation on the innumerable ways that one can live one's life. But we must have values. And if we hold those values true and help others understand them, then we can still have a splendid dinner together.
What does that mean? A wife, a husband, a son. A baby holds your hands, and then suddenly there's this huge man lifting you off the ground, and then he's gone.
Number 26, Akira, directed by Katsuhiro Otomo. If coolness was a currency, then Akira would make us all very rich. Sink into the sublime chaos that is Neo-Tokyo, a post-nuclear re-envisioning of how Japan will look after World War III. Teenage biker gangs commit acts of brutal violence on one another. Revolutionaries bomb the buildings of the new hybrid governmental military facilities. All the while, the very real corporations maintain their advertising prowess, as their logos fill the neon-covered skylines. That is what Akira is actually about. We follow one of the emerging biker gangs, most notably our two main characters, Kaneda and Tetsuo. Both of their stories diverging greatly from one another as they're swept up into a world much greater than they are. And like every other inhabitant of this universe, they persist in an existence that they can no longer control. Their personal stories becoming all the more insignificant in a world that's about to figuratively and literally explode. The story of Akira does not centre on a simple narrative in which we're invested in its cause and effect. Based on Otomo's original manga, it's an accomplishment in and of itself that Akira was able to compress this rich world into the format of a motion picture. The film focuses on the hyper-violence that's assuming reign in our ever more technological world. The children are purposeless, whereas the adults are indoctrinated in one ideology or another. Yet the presence of a very real threat lies underneath the city. The remnants of the young boy Akira, hidden in a military base underground. This secret of what makes Neo-Tokyo exist, simultaneously, will be the thing that will destroy it. Akira brought anime to the Western world with its complex style of storytelling, as well as its absurdly detailed level of animation. Hand-drawn animation had never looked this good, and the team behind Akira's look created a super fluid style of motion by increasing the amount of animation cells. It also had the most amount of different colours used in any animation at the time. To this day, just watching Akira is still unbelievable that they were able to achieve the visual splendour that unfolds in front of you. Akira was a feat for the form of animation. Anyone could watch this film with the sound off and you would still be completely astounded. But amongst being a feast for the eyes, it's the complex layers of society it depicts with nuance. How normal people from all walks of life manage to fit into a story that's so beyond their recognition. How it displays the looming threats that have emerged in globalized worlds, destroying cultures and breeding intense violence between factions. Some of the best sequences in Akira are not simply its magnificent scale of destruction, but how every event, no matter how big or small, can drag a normal person into an abnormal mode of being. Akira furthered what was capable in the filmic depictions of dystopian worlds that seems so familiar. It developed an aesthetic that reigns supreme even today. The West was introduced to anime with Akira, and with it, the mature and intricate philosophies that came with so much of the medium. Akira remains a milestone in these worlds, and in the world of film alike. Number 25, Gone with the Wind, directed by Victor Fleming. What became Hollywood's first grand epic of its newly emerged studio system would remain to this day the archetype for its synonymous genre. Although directing is attributed to Victor Fleming, Gone with the Wind should perhaps be attributed to producer David O. Selznick. What was the most expensive film at the time, starring Hollywood's most famous actor, scored by Max Steiner, and shot in 3-strip Technicolor, the studios were banking on Gone with the Wind with everything that they had, and it just so happened to work. At 4 hours in length, featuring an intermission as well as an overture, Gone with the Wind presents us with the romantic Civil War epic. And by romantic, this isn't merely referring to the actual romance story. Gone with the Wind presents everything of the once upon a time US on a grand, immense vista. It's a film where everything is large, the story sprawls many years, the family at the centre traverses all of their joys and tragedies, all the while a war rages in the background, transforming the landscape. Gone with the Wind is a film that sings the praises of its image, not cutting a single corner to make the film frame the pinnacle of its storytelling device. The film loves film. The image itself, shot on Technicolor, doesn't show us how life truly is. It's revealing the hidden beauty that can only be exposed through cinema. The colours are warm, the love is sweeping, and the loss catastrophic. Does Gone with the Wind appeal to our sentimentalities? Absolutely. But within this genre, with this approach, it only works in its favour. Gone with the Wind from a narrative sense is many things. It's the story of the American Civil War, of a tumultuous love, of a wealthy family losing what they have, of a changing society. But what Gone with the Wind really is a staple for the capabilities of cinema. The moments and the people are a joy to spend time with, particularly the protagonist Scarlett O'Hara, being one of the most fascinating portrayals of femininity that cinema has conjured. Delicate and powerful, her childish stubbornness also being her greatest asset. Gone with the Wind is a giant film in every sense of the word. We follow the horror of Civil War America, while at the same time deal with the doomed romance of a young couple, Clark Gable as Rhett Butler giving his most memorable and vulnerable performance. The sheer drama on display is an orchestrated feast of colour, music and character, and as the score swells up and Scarlett stares over the hazed landscape, we're reminded of what cinema can be. There still aren't many films that can take on a larger task than Gone with the Wind. This is a film of multiple craftsmen working together to make a piece of art, and their effort is on display in every frame. Gone with the Wind, as I am to describe it, is a romantic view of bygone times and bygone people, a testament to people's strengths and hardships, their prides and their follies. And though much of the discussion of the film has become focused on more historical issues, it remains a triumph, and from a cinematic lens, an example that studios can exist and are able to deliver not only spectacles for the masses, but to make those spectacles something beautiful.
No, I'm not tired, Scarlett. They could all be. Ashley.
Number 24. The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, directed by Peter Greenaway. And whilst on the subject of romanticism, it's now time to examine a film that too goes out of its way to warp reality, displaying its lack thereof, although this time, beauty shall lie in the grotesque.
This is a three-star supper. You must learn the rules, eh? I need to eat and drink the very best, and that's expensive.
The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover takes place over several nights in an otherworldly warehouse turned luxurious restaurant. Every night, Albert, his wife Georgina, and his parade of thugs barge their way into the restaurant and enjoy their meals at the expense of everybody else. All the while, Georgina has many sexual rendezvous with a stranger she's seen and immediately fallen in love with. Fueled by Michael Gambon's portrayal of Albert Spicker, perhaps the most vile character to ever exist in cinema, we're subjected to all manner of degrading, animalistic and vile behaviour.
Terrine, a filet lamb, a poison,
It's poisson.
What did you say, Georgie? What did you say, Georgie? What did you say? What did you say? What did you say?
Poisson.
And what is all this in the service of? Well, for a film whose interpretation of many different ideas I still haven't exactly settled on. Cook, Thief, Wife, Lover is a kind of anti-cinema. Greenaway wears the film's theatrical tropes like a badge of honour. Structurally, the film is presented in acts, each act served to us via a menu. The sequences play out as if beneath the proscenium arch of a stage. We move almost exclusively laterally throughout the film. We never leave the seat of the spectator, remaining on the axis of the observer, almost forced to endure the horrors that occur on screen. And although what's on screen is horrific, it's also, in its own macabre way, completely glorious.
His mother is a Roman Catholic. He's been in prison in South Africa. He's as black as the ace of spades, and he probably drinks his own pee.
The Shakespearean resolve of our actors only heightens the intensity of Greenaway's intense choice of topics, orchestrating the movements to the score of Michael Nyman, costumes designed by Jean-Paul Gaultier, and each room a monochromatic set piece. We remain trapped in a beautifully revolting world. The context of the film is wondrous. You can take each element of mise-en-scène and admire its beauty, yet it's the content which aims to do nothing but revile us.
Don't you like mussels? You've got to learn to like them if you're going to eat with me. Don't you dare throw up in here, Mitchell, or I'll get spanged at the stuff and back down your throat.
Our characters speak such disgusting jargon that some of their conversations seem to make no sense at all. The violence of the film is so gut-wrenching that it moves from an uncomfortable watch to pure horror. An already difficult to watch scene will be made even more disgusting by Greenaway, almost as if he's putting us through an endurance test. Oftentimes, it feels that Greenaway himself doesn't like the fact that we are still watching the film. So why? What's the purpose of the film? Is it a misanthropic tale of depravity and the gluttony of the human spirit? Is it an attack on the buffoonery of the bourgeoisie, ingratiating themselves into places of culture, regardless of their own lack of refinement or decorum? Is it an anarchistic mood piece, aimed to have no real meaning other than shake the foundation of the cinematic medium? Well, it feels like all of those things. Many times I find myself questioning the core intent of the cook, the thief, his wife and her lover, yet I still find myself returning and amazed by its unflinching look at degeneracy and elegance rolled into one unforgettable tasting course.
I'm going to the loo.
Number 23, Mirror, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. The dream world has become an integral realm of cinema, just as it has our own realities. We attempt to understand the translucent domain of these mirages, but in Mirror, we do not approach dreams with a Freudian or Jungian perspective. Rather, this is a uniquely Tarkovskian perspective, one that shows that all of life is inseparable from a dream.
Что с тобой, Маруся? Тебе плохо?
Не удивляйся. Это так понятно. Я люблю тебя.
What is very clearly Tarkovsky's most personal piece, Mirror is not a film to be described, for it may not even be possible to describe it. It's a story of subjective memory. A life passes in front of us. They seem to be of a young boy. We catch glimpses of his mother. We witness dramatic vignettes that appear as suddenly as they fade away. Mirror is a collection of experiences, of image and sound, and these images, though crafted in the film, are our own images too. The wind blowing through a field, the water dripping from cracked walls. We have experienced these before. Mirror is an exercise in the blurring of multiple subjectivities. The same actors play multiple characters. The materiality of the world will alter with the movement of the camera, and that which clearly possesses no grand meaning, now with a new lens, holds the answers to all the mysteries of life. Tarkovsky has always utilised the elements of the natural world to tell his stories, yet what's most unique to Mirror is that permeable barrier between reality and the unreal, a barrier which we continually pass in between. The gust of wind in the field becomes the rattling on the ground, which becomes a touch of snow, which becomes the frost in the air. We move through the sensorial experiences which unite us all. Our personal experiences that make us who we are are not trapped in a singular place and time. We carry them with us wherever we go. Mirror is like a quantum map of one boy's fleeting thoughts, and I've done my best to describe it, but to watch it talks of that feeling of being alive, the one that's somewhere in the middle of everything, that place that hovers above time, not quite silent, not quite real. It may sound abstract, but for those that have seen Mirror, they too have been to that place. Number 22, Odette, directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. It was the work of Carl Dreyer wherein I had the most difficulty in selecting my favourite film of his. I knew one of his films was to be on this list, but in looking at his oeuvre that included The Passion of Joan of Arc, Day of Wrath and Gertrude, I had to select Odette as my choice of his masterpiece.
Farfar, hvor går du hen?
I spørger jo ikke mig. I siger jo ikke mig, hvor I går hen.
Odette, like much of Dreyer's work, is about his own views of faith and the divine. Based on a play of the same name, Odette is a theological and spiritual piece on the lives of a rural family. A widower and his children are all undergoing a differing and unique struggle. One of the children aims to be married, while another is about to have a child of their own, and one of the sons has proclaimed to be Jesus Christ in the flesh and wanders the farm, decrying the age's lack of faith. It's an unforgettable and haunting performance as the eldest son meanders through scenes like a ghost, all the while the camera drifts with the same ethereal demeanour. Odette carries the character of a play. Long scenes of people talking are presented as long, uninterrupted takes. A very sombre and quiet piece, the staging of Odette is incredibly calculated. Shooting a few rooms in very few shots seems like a simple task, but Dreyer's use of lighting throughout Odette conveys the depth of what we're watching. Light appears more akin to Dreyer's silent works, deep, tall shadows and varying degrees of lightness, displaying intricacy in what we see. People talking in a room suddenly becomes drenched in drama, not only because of what they say, but how we see it. Their solemnity is worn on their bodies and on the world around them.
Vil du stanse? Kom tilbage. Du skal.
Odette is a muted experience. To explain its rising tension and denouement would be perhaps to misinterpret its purpose as an art piece. The film is incredibly subdued to the point where action takes a backseat and thought and meditation are placed at the forefront. A deeply spiritual and religious film, Odette features characters with opposing views on faith, and although the film's finale may be difficult to view through any secular interpretation, it doesn't matter. For much like many of the great films, its themes transcend its immediate topics and carries them to astonishing heights. A film about the simple yet painful struggles of the pastoral is a film that in reality is about the great mysteries of life and death.
Se så på din mor. Når jeg nævner Jesu navn, vil hun rejse sig.
Number 21, Lion, directed by Matthew Kassovitz. Very rarely can a film adequately capture the world it attempts to depict with the grit and feel necessary to truly understand it. Film in many ways has become an elitist art form. We only need look at the gilded film festivals and award ceremonies that spend millions on celebrating real art. But a true urban cinema can be found in Laen. Not just because it's good at its depiction of the outer suburbs of Paris, but because of its legitimate authenticity. Laen follows 3 boys from these suburbs over the course of a single day. It captures the culture, the kinetic energy and the unpredictability of life in these urban holdings, because the crew that made the film understood them. When filming Laen, the crew opted for primarily non-professional actors and moved into the suburb for where they were filming. And as the lives of these people hangs on a thread, with disruption around the corner from police, violence exploding from everywhere they turn, and simply looking for their means of survival, Kassovitz employs a hyper-energetic, handheld style that puts us right in the middle of this world, cutting and moving with the same neurotic edge that's needed in a world just to get by. The film is one of 2 halves. The first, in what will later be realised as the more honest suburbs, comes with an edge. Although we're in an environment that thrives in danger, there's an honesty in what's presented to us. We smash into scenes like a car colliding with its victim. We cut on the sounds of gunfire. We're constantly snapped into this precarious reality, but at least we know where we are. It's only in the second half of the film, when we see our characters in the city of Paris, the more civilised, the more correct part of town, that our characters become outcasts and the film becomes a more uptight experience. But there's still something dangerous here, only it lurks in this seemingly pleasant area. From the very second the location changes, we see the visible barrier between our protagonists and this new surrounding. Laen's image of class separation is one that's mature without fetishizing the life of the poor. Struggles do exist, but sometimes bad decisions are made. The saddest part being that most decisions are beyond anyone's control. Laen celebrates Paris, all the while begging for it to change. We fly above the tower blocks and are hit with a moment of serenity. All the while, we know the instability that lies just below, as the mantra of "fuck the police" rings through the boulevards. Laen is not just capturing a certain place, it's a vessel for a certain time, just before the millennium, wherein we are moving toward a much more hyperactive world. Some parts of those worlds are still moving, while some are inert. And in this world that is constantly moving, some people are going to be left behind. Laen is a mood piece, perfectly depicting not only this world, but the angst that persists in those that have an urge to destroy the world. But our characters don't want that. They want to destroy the world as it is now. The 2 most vital thematics of Laen are space and time, and they are both moving. Is it going to be bad? Or do we just exist in a case of so far, so good? Number 20. Love Exposure, directed by Chan-wook. If ever there were a film that would be deemed so lowbrow and pathetically absurd that just the act of describing it would be so ridiculous, you would either question that person's taste, mental faculties, or think they were just lying, then it would be my next entry, Love Exposure. So let's get right into it. Our main character, Yu, is the son of a Catholic priest. His mother dies, and as he senses the growing distance between himself and his father, realises the only way to maintain their relationship is to commit sins for his forgiveness. Eventually this leads him to progress further and further until he becomes a professional pervert in a crew of friends that take photographs up the skirts of girls. One day, upon losing a bet, he has to cross-dress and walk the streets, wherein he finds a girl that reminds him of his sexual fantasies of the Virgin Mary. Kaori, a damaged girl that hates all men except for Kurt Cobain and has a tattoo of Jesus, falls in love with Yu's alter ego. All the while, a Christian cult led by its leader, who genitally disfigured an abuser, is creating a sexless sect, which is important, as Yu's erection is also an integral plot point. This, alongside an underground hentai collective, a mental institution, and a love triangle, and Love Exposure, is one of the most charming films you can come across.
Yoko-chan, hentai wa baka ni shicca dame yo.
Hai!
Sono koto kimo ni meishite.
Hai!
Love Exposure is the kind of film that attempts to display that life does have a purpose for everyone. Our main character, Yu, is a young man that commits awful acts, but we get to see his intentions. He's naive and he's simply someone attempting to win his father's attention and the love of his life, all the while navigating the most lurid, outrageous and downright cartoonish aspects of modern Japan.
すいません。小学生しか愛せなくて。許す。
すいません。女の人のゲロをするのが好きで。
許す。
Love Exposure is a critique of contemporary Japanese culture, but all the while Shon Sono wants us to try and understand it. Shooting on handheld digital camera, the lo-fi aesthetic of Love Exposure is worn with pride, as is its ridiculous content. Shon Sono wants us to find some meaning, any level of joy in what we see, and that means exploring every possible avenue of existence there is. Yu is an endearing character because he has purpose in life, and wherever we find him, his morality never fails.
ねえねえちょ僕の顔見てなんかごめんなさい。いやちゃんと見てね。いや。
Perhaps there's a life lesson in Love Exposure for us. Of course, if you are to watch it, go along for the ride and just accept what's put in front of you. But then take that mentality and apply it to the real world. If someone lives their life to the fullest, with a purpose and with a code, perhaps that is the true love for life on display. That's what it means to be exposed to love. Who would have thought that a 4-hour film about perverted, cross-dressing, sexually dysfunctional Christians would be one of the most genuinely sincere and touching films I've seen. Honestly, there's really nothing else quite like it. Number 19. Persona, directed by Ingmar Bergman. When people discuss high art, it's very rare that they're referring to cinema. That realm is reserved exclusively for literature and paintings of masters. Only a few films are considered part of that high echelon, and the first film I think of when I think of cinema as high art is in fact Persona. Made in the middle point of his career, Persona is the perfect blend of all the Bergman-esque traits that made his work so memorable. His deep philosophical quandaries on our place within the world, as well as his very human lens on the emotional depth that individuals carry with them. Following Elizabeth, an actress that has suddenly become mute, and her carer Alma on an isolated island, trying to pinpoint the meaning behind Persona, is a riddle in and of itself. Alma being the voice of the film is the primary source of conflict, as she begins to use the voiceless Elizabeth as a vessel for her to pour her own insecurities and doubts into.
Vi var ju lika nöjda bägge två, vi vill väl inte ha några barn. Minns ni inte just då i alla fall?
But Elizabeth does not respond to this, and as we see growing similarities between the two, we begin to question, is all of this a projection from Alma? Is any of what we're seeing really going on? Persona, first and foremost, is a film about identity, with a rich psychological depth questioning the person we present ourselves as. Is our memory of ourselves different from the real self? Can we absorb someone else's persona to make it our own? The ghostly presence of Elizabeth is where the film talks about such enigmas through its radical aesthetic. Shot in stark black and white by Bergman's longtime cinematographer Sven Nykvist, never has there been a more vital use of framing in cinema.
Du tycker han är äcklig med sin tjocka mun och sin fula kropp, sina fuktiga och vädjande ögon. Du tycker han är äcklig och du är rädd.
The close-up of faces, the use of the frame cutting an image to create an illusion. The duality represented by Persona is in every frame, in every boundary of light and dark that paints the screen. And speaking of screen, this doesn't even touch one of the fundamental aspects of Persona. Beginning with a truly experimental prologue, we're bombarded with shots and sequences of screens and cameras. Persona opens with a statement that it is a movie. Then it resets, never to mention it again. Subconsciously, we watch all of Persona with this in mind. Ultimately, where do we fit into this picture? How does our role as a viewer affect these two fictional characters' blurring of identity? It would be impossible to even introduce all of the themes in Persona. It's just that layered of a piece. It's stripped down of all non-necessities, and what it gives us, it gives so much. A truly mature, philosophical, and hopefully introspective masterpiece.
Machine guns and flamethrowers to rout out the Vietcong from their entrenched positions, offering and underground now.
Number 18. Jean Dillmont, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Bruxelles. Directed by Chantal Akerman. Over the course of 3 days, a woman cleans her home. She prepares dinner, and she completes her chores. The cycle then repeats. Her actions are invisible, and thus she is invisible. Jean Dillmont highlights with a drab aesthetic a crucial look at the female experience. With more in common with a video art piece than traditional cinematic storytelling, Jean Dillmont utilises the inertia of its characters' actions to highlight their meaninglessness, completely removing her from any kind of agency or even any kind of humanity. Clocking in at over 200 minutes long, many of which are spent watching completely mundane tasks in their entirety. Jean Dillmont for Chantal Akerman was to represent a lifestyle that's been accepted as a form of living, uncomfortably forcing us to view the normalised tyranny of so many men and the meek subservience of so many women. The acts of Jean Dillmont are presented without any intrusion from the filmmaker. The camera is static, and there's no point that they're cut away from or compressed for ease of the viewer. This is the unseen life of many women, and we are forced to watch it to bring into reality that which is so often ignored. The robotic and routine actions pervade as the drabness of time becomes larger and larger, just as is Jean's submission to her son and to the sexual objectification from other men. But this life becomes unsustainable, and it's only the most insignificant change within this carefully crafted routine that collapses Jean's world. She's removed from her set regimen, which allows her to conform, and all of a sudden, her individuality is screaming in her face. What is she doing, and how could she do this? The film requires a nothingness to its actions, which in turn requires an ultimate kind of catharsis. By the film's ending, there truly is only one way to redeem everything that she's done. It may be a difficult watch, and perhaps I wouldn't even call it enjoyable, but it is most certainly a sublime piece of cinema with a vital message for both men and women alike. Number 17, Mulholland Drive, directed by David Lynch. If Mirror is the capturing of a dream on film, then Mulholland Drive is the capturing of a nightmare. Beginning its life as a TV pilot before transitioning into a feature film, Mulholland Drive is the warped story of an aspiring actress trying to make it in Hollywood. Though this isn't quite the Hollywood that we know, it's the Hollywood of our subconscious, one that permanently exists in the pit of our memory, whose images and people are all there, but not exactly how we remember them.
This is the girl. Hey, that girl is not in my film! It's no longer your film.
The work of David Lynch is inseparable from his work in transcendental meditation, and although he's been very open about his process when creating a film, the actuality of what his films represent remains opaque. Lynch's work is that of the unconscious mind. They operate on a dream logic, much as when we do when we are asleep. The connections between characters and places are tenuous, but they're by no means meaningless. They're dark labyrinths to navigate, uncertain of what we'll find, but everything within Mulholland Drive holds a secret to its meaning. Truth is hidden away, behind corners, in mysterious containers, behind curtains. We're led on a neo-noir mystery and constantly have our expectations subverted. One moment we're following the story of a missing identity, only to then believe that nothing that we've witnessed even existed.
Hey, pretty girl. Time to wake up.
Lynch's work has been attributed to his very specific stylistic form of storytelling. But then what is it about Mulholland Drive that separates it from the rest of his work? I think that there's something about the world that Mulholland Drive creates that's exactly how we imagine a real living nightmare to be. People aren't intrinsically a threat, yet everything about their presence we want to reject. The eerie, almost prophetic story of becoming a star, memories that seem to have never existed. Many of these elements are pervasive throughout Lynch's work, but there's just something about the specificity of a feeling that's captured in Mulholland Drive that's perfect. Mulholland Drive is a frustrating film for many, however I believe that it's simply because it's being viewed in the wrong sense. Mulholland Drive never seemed to me to be a film to figure out. I believe that instinct is how this film was made, and thus instinct is how this film should be read. It utilises all of the signifiers that make a work Lynchian. The nightmarish landscapes of Eraserhead, the sadism in the underbelly of Americana we see in Blue Velvet, the immaterial world of personas in Lost Highway. They're all present here. And these things aren't logical, but we get them.
Do you want us to shut everything down? Then we'll shut everything down.
The use of an image of a man standing under a single light as he talks to us in a never-ending world of blackness. Two strangers emerging from nowhere, talking about the monster that lives behind the building. We know these experiences. We've had them in the abyss of our mind. We remember them more than some real encounters we've had. This metaphysical logic is where Lynch speaks to us, and he does it no better than in Mulholland Drive. The horror that is Hollywood is a world of fake identities, plasticity, and aggressive pop culture. Mulholland Drive is if you take that world at night, shake it up, and then dream about it. The nightmare may be awful, but only because the reality isn't far off. Number 16, The Searchers, directed by John Ford. For reasons that I can't explain, when I first watched The Searchers, I didn't like it. But I think that with time, I've come to realise that I simply didn't understand what I was watching. The Western is perhaps the most genre of any genre pieces, with iconographies more anticipated and expected than other genres to the point of cliché. Even to have John Wayne is in itself an archetype of the Western genre. The story of revenge on a tribe of natives by an old cowboy seemed so generic to me. I was missing something, and it was only after expanding my own knowledge of cinema, realising the grand influence of John Ford's work, and rewatching again, that I instantly saw the sheer brilliance that was The Searchers.
Aaron, get Martin, will you? Martin! Oh, thank you, sister. I can sure use that coffee. Pass the sugar, son. No. Oh, fine. Oh, wait a minute, sister. I didn't get any coffee yet.
First of all, the tropes of the Western epic begins with The Searchers. Ford's mastery of shooting landscapes with extremely wide vistas of Monument Valley was so idiosyncratic of his style that to even shoot there now is tantamount to plagiarism. Ethan, the main character of the film, is not the gung-ho macho cowboy we anticipate. He's an anti-hero, plagued with prejudice and loss, finding the idea of settling into civilized society an impossibility. His return to the homestead at the film's finale is the climax of a Greek epic, perhaps even a Greek tragedy. There's great complexity within The Searchers, dealing with themes of racism, the relations of natives, and being an outsider of your own world.
Well, Reverend, that tears it. No, and you stay out of this. All of you. I don't want you with me. I don't need you for what I gotta do.
But especially when you examine The Searchers alongside the remainder of John Ford's filmography, we see that the humanism of the Grapes of Wrath, or the man who shot Liberty Valance, is the central point of The Searchers. We're excited to see Ethan embark on his adventure and to follow the hero's journey, but he's a myth. Ethan can never be the hero. The hero is sacrificial, and most of the time, the world doesn't need a hero, or doesn't want him. This is emblemized in what's probably the most famous final shot in the history of cinema. The Searchers is a film that's swelling with emotion. On its surface, it's a revenge story, but besides that mechanical action, the film is about people. It's about struggle.
All right, now you fight fair, Marty.
Hey, wait a minute, Marty. Oh, somebody's fiddle. Hey, Seth.
Like many Ford films, the setting of the Old West is shot so beautifully that it renders a mythical quality to the stories that are being told. But the greatest moments of the film are in the silence of nature, when people talk and try to find how they fit into this world. What does a hero do when the world is in no need for one? The fingerprints of The Searchers exist all around us. Any epic or adventure film can't avoid its monolithic presence in the public subconscious. If you've seen Star Wars, then you've seen a decent amount of The Searchers. And as Orson Welles said himself when asked about his favourite filmmakers, he said, "I prefer the old masters." By that I mean John Ford, John Ford, and John Ford. Ford created romanticized tapestries of the old American West, poetic landscapes that tell the stories of an era that's past. but the stories of the kind of complex characters that colour our lives forever.
She's not
Shut your dirty mouth!
I hope you die.
That'll be the day.
Number 15. Barry Lyndon, directed by Stanley Kubrick. At some point after its release, Barry Lyndon became the forgotten film of Kubrick's filmography. It was, for reasons unknown, the black sheep, and it was only in recent memory that there began to be a reappraisal of it. How this occurred, I have no idea, but we have to ensure that this never happens again, because Barry Lyndon remains a powerhouse of ingenuity, captivating storytelling, and a level of skill that only a master such as Kubrick could possibly create.
Barry's father had been bred, like many other young sons of a genteel family, to the profession of the law. And there is no doubt he would have made an eminent figure in his profession, had he not been killed in a duel.
Barry Lyndon is an 18th century period drama, and one that's utterly Kubrickian in every possible sense. Its extravagant presentation, the downfall of humanity in a decadent society, and an operatic, theatrical approach whose style screams in the face of its audience.
And as such things so often happen, these thoughts closely coincided with his setting first sight upon a lady who will henceforth play a considerable part in the drama of his life.
Barry Lyndon is split into 2 chapters and follows the rise and subsequent fall of one Redmond Barry. The story is a quintessential period piece of a gilded cage society that's become disenfranchised with the reality of life. Yet in the manner in which Kubrick tells the story of Barry Lyndon, that remains its crowning jewel. To watch Barry Lyndon is to be taken on a tour of the history of the great masters of painting, many of whom were the inspiration for the film's unbelievable compositions. Being the perfectionist he was, Kubrick required lenses from NASA so that he could shoot the interior scenes by candlelight, as was done at the time.
Let those laugh that win. Gentlemen.
The film is just one incredible image after another. Intricately framed, the subjects play around in this beautiful, yet almost aggressively perfect manner of shooting. The rigidity of the compositions displaying the characters' restrictions in this world of societal pressure and expectation. And if there is a trait of Kubrick that I simply can't get enough of, it's his explosions of chaos throughout his meticulously crafted works. While the majority of the film is made up of sequences that only a master could craft, he still has the ability to transgress his own techniques, shooting handheld to bring audiences into the picturesque sublime as they implode from the inside. Reminding us that these societies of strict decorum were ultimately still inhabited by people like us. Every technique in Barry Lyndon is loud and assertive, as is all of Kubrick's work. It is pure genre, exploring the depth of humanity in these alien societies. Completely authentic and filled to the brim with images to rival the greatest artist of our species, Barry Lyndon remains supreme as a tale of a society unsustainable in its customs, told by an artist at the pinnacle of his craft.
Barry believed, and not without some reason, that it had been a declaration of war against him by Bullingdon from the start, and that the evil consequences which ensued were entirely of Bullingdon's creating.
Number 14, The Night of the Hunter, directed by Charles Laughton. The biggest tragedy of The Night of the Hunter is that due to the terrible reception it garnered upon its initial release, Charles Laughton was never given another opportunity to direct again. This was to be his first and last feature, and due to its initial panning, Laughton also never had the opportunity to witness the legacy that The Night of the Hunter was to have on cinema. Preacher and killer Harry Powell, played by Robert Mitchum, infiltrates a family after learning that their criminal patriarch has left them the $10,000 he'd recently stolen. With all the elements of a pulp fiction novel, There'll be nothing to suggest what The Night of the Hunter has to offer, although most discussion of the film begins with the legitimate threat of the charming Harry Powell, which results in one of the most unsettling characters in what's undoubtedly one of cinema's greatest performances.
Now watch and I'll show you the story of life. These fingers, dear hearts, is always a warring and a tugging one against the other. Now watch 'em. Old brother left hand hates a fighting, and it looks like love's a goner. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hot dog loves a winning. Yes, sirree. It's love that won, and old left hand hate is down for the count.
The Night of the Hunter serves as a coming-of-age story that happens to be in the setting of an American Gothic folktale. A mysterious evil invades a small, close-knit community, and the children are the only ones that seem to notice. It's a thriller told from the perspective of the outsiders. The children don't understand the world, but they can distinguish a monster when they see one.
Come on, children. Off to bed with the both of you.
The world as such is almost storybook in its approach, cinematography by Stanley Cortez taking the majority of its influence from German expressionist cinema. The shadows are absolutely black, and the geometry of much of the world is painted by the harsh intrusion of light. I say intrusion because the world of The Night of the Hunter is dark. Evil has spread and consumes the innocence that the world once had so much of. Even much of what the children see appears with an almost fictitious aesthetic. The view of a man singing on a horse in the distance shows the simplicity of a child's understanding of evil, but the threat still remains. The Night of the Hunter over time became regarded as a staple of American cinema, and yet it still remains so much of an outlier. Even watching it now, it doesn't nestle in with any genre. It holds too much love and hope for it to be a traditional noir. It gradually moves away from the story's main threat to be considered a thriller, and it looks and plays out differently than any other American film of the era. There are moments of the film in which the gritty, murderous tale becomes a dreamlike exploration of human nature. The reason why The Night of the Hunter stands the test of time is a multitude of things. One may point to Robert Mitchum's pure encapsulation of the human monster as the most obvious, and this is definitely true. But I believe that because there is no American film quite like Night of the Hunter. At the midpoint of the film, the now iconic eerie river sequence physically transports the film into a children's fable.
She had two pretty children.
We see little animals as a young girl sings, almost as if the film itself is protecting the children. Humanism begins to emerge, and where we end the film is not at all where we began. The Night of the Hunter spends most of its time as a terrifying experience that perfectly captures the feeling of dread, but it should be remembered most as a story of the strength and courage of a child.
Dad.
Number 13, Tokyo Story, directed by Yasujiro Ozu. The work of Ozu can be identified just from the still images of his work. The Ozuian style was an approach to cinema that he never deviated from. Intimate family dramas, the camera placed on a tripod at a low height, the composition dictated by the ubiquitous straight-line geometry of interior Japanese architecture. His stories were always quiet and slow, focusing on the bittersweet moments of what it is to live.
あんたもお父さんみたいにお医者さんか？あんたがのお医者さんになるこらおばあちゃんおるかの？
His works always evoked a kind of joy, but one that's fleeting. love that is intense and powerful, but we know must end at some point. Ozu as a director is one wherein we look at his legacy as an entire body of work, although the standout piece among all of his pieces, the one wherein the culmination of his technique reached its pinnacle, was his 1953 film, Tokyo Story. Following the elderly Hirayama couple, who travel from the countryside to Tokyo to visit their son, it's soon revealed that the family is too busy to spend any time with them, aside from their widowed daughter-in-law, played by Setsuko Hara. Words can't express the emotional depth that Tokyo Story possesses. It carries with it a sentimentality of immense proportions, and its look at the fading beauty of all life makes it a very difficult piece to not be overwhelmed by. How do we transition between one generation to another? Is it possible to not lose all upon one generation's departure? Tokyo Story is universal, the silent introspection that occurs with life and death. How we always wish that we could have more time with those we love, and finding deep meaning in every passing moment in life. Characters talk directly to the camera in Ozu films, bringing a degree of intimacy and subjective experience that serves to highlight the humanism of his tales. For it's people that's what's most important to Ozu, their meditations and reflections on life as the film moves, like us, gradually and inevitably towards its end. Tokyo Story, much like all of Ozu's work, operates on an elliptical style of editing. Important events aren't shown on screen, rather spoken about by the characters after the fact. Ozu wants to hear his characters speak and think and ponder. The external world doesn't matter anywhere near as much as the internal, for even when we see a wind chime or a boat passing by, we think on what this means to the characters, but perhaps more so, what this means to ourselves. Tokyo Story is a constant interplay between the tragedy and sublime of being alive, finding beauty in the sorrow and the majestic experience of what it is to simply be. Number 12. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, directed by Sergio Leone. I still don't believe that I've seen a better final half hour to a film than The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. The premise is genius in its simplicity. $200,000 is buried somewhere. One man knows the name and location of the cemetery, while the other knows the name and location of the grave. All the while they're both being tracked by a bounty hunter, and they all have to work together before they can finally betray each other.
Why don't we tell each other our half of the secret? Why don't we? Huh? You go first.
No, I think it's better that you start.
The Good, the Bad and the Ugly may be considered as the ultimate Western. However, it was initially created as a satire of the traditional Western genre that had emerged up to that point. Sergio Leone didn't aim to romanticize the Old West. Instead, he focused on the chaos and immorality of its inhabitants, even if, by the end, we still find ourselves completely obsessed with these dubious, yet undeniably charming criminals. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is a tremendous cinematic spectacle that, all things put aside, is just an incredibly fun watch. The score by Ennio Morricone is one of the greatest in all of cinema, and the scenes that are conducted to his soundtrack are elevated, becoming some of the most memorable scenes in cinema. Hitchcock may be considered the father of suspense, but Sergio Leone's use of silence and editing throughout the film makes everything seem so much more exciting. And that's what I always think of when I think of this film. I think of a bunch of joyous adjectives that sometimes so much of film misses out on. Excitement, spectacle, tension, comical.
When you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk.
It may be a piece of entertainment, but it's a degree pinnacle of fine art.
But if you miss, you had better miss very well. Whoever double-crosses me and leaves me alive, he understands nothing about Tuco. Nothing.
Number 11, Taxi Driver, directed by Martin Scorsese. In a career as celebrated as Martin Scorsese, it's almost an insult to say that his most celebrated work is also the least Scorsese of his filmography. But this is also to do with the fact that Taxi Driver belongs equally to screenwriter Paul Schrader.
I just want to go out. I really want to. I got some bad ideas in my head.
Paul Schrader is no stranger to stories of societal outcasts whose obsessions explode in a spectacle of violence. Yet Taxi Driver remains the standard for the cinematic tale of isolation, of the forgotten people that we pass in the street every day, of those who have to escape the world by receding into their own minds, only to find a landscape that's much, much worse.
Well, I'm the only one here. Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Oh, yeah? Huh? Okay. Huh?
Robert De Niro plays Travis Bickle, a New York taxi driver who works nights. He loathes, and in many ways fears, the degeneracy that he witnesses each night he drives through the city. His hatred grows as his mental stability deteriorates. The world is vile and evil, and yet what Travis cannot see is that this is a projection. It's his self-hatred, for he is just another person that's part of the world he loathes. Travis visits pornography theatres, deals with the criminals he claims to despise. Taxi Driver asks whether it is we that create the degeneracy of the modern world, or if we're the receptacles for all of its rancid waste.
It's like, I think that the president should just clean up this whole mess here. He should just flush it right down the fucking toilet.
And the world of Taxi Driver is just that, one that's spent wallowing in its dregs. Taxi Driver is a character study. We get glimpses of Travis's perspective, but Scorsese takes the appropriate approach in never letting us romanticize Travis's worldview. Rather, we see the objective truth of his descent into insanity. The camera will turn away from Travis when he becomes a creature too pathetic to acknowledge, and it will stare at him in shock upon his point of no return.
Have led us into war, into poverty, into unemployment and inflation. Today I say to you, we have reached the turning point.
Paul Schrader said that a person only feels at their loneliest when surrounded by other people. Scorsese's direction of the city of New York is precisely that. The people that surround Travis are innumerable yet faceless. We see them through the windscreen of Travis's taxi, through the rain illuminated by neon lights, and the score of Bernard Herrmann plays as this gentle soul is being dragged into the depths of what a human being can become. De Niro delivers a performance of such nuance of a man battling his own psyche. His gestures and delivery are perfect. A man who could help himself by removing himself from the situation, but his own radicalization comes at the fact that he can't escape this world, because he doesn't want to. He revels in his hatred. Why look away when he can stare at his own hatred in the face? Taxi Driver is the story of one man's psychology, and yet the terror lies that there is a little Travis in all of us.
You know? But it's a good thing to have just as a threat.
Number 10, Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. As we enter the top 10, I had to decide which films I consider the top tier of the top tier. Many of the films mentioned thus far can switch places with one another to some degree, but from here on, I truly had to find the highest echelon. And the first film that breaches that category was Coppola's Palme d'Or descent into the heart of darkness, Apocalypse Now.
Don't look at the camera. Don't look at the camera. Just go by like you're fighting. Like you're fighting. Don't look at the camera. The television. Just go through. Go through. Just go by. Keep on going. Keep going. Don't look at the camera. Go on. Keep going.
Adapted from Joseph Conrad's novel, bringing the story away from the colonized Congo into the more contemporary setting of the Vietnam War, Coppola's depiction of terror couldn't be captured more perfectly than in the insanity that is the jungle. And deep within the recesses of that alien terrain, there lies one American that has ventured too deep. Apocalypse Now is as much of a horror film as it is a war film. Our main character Willard sails down a river with his company to assassinate one Colonel Kurtz, and as he moves further and further downstream, he's forced to address the declining nature for what appears to be all of humanity. It's an otherworldly force that takes over, dragging him there, closer to Kurtz and further from reality. The morality of people is discarded for their purely animal instincts, and the endlessly setting sun seems to cloak the film in a blanket of dreamlike stillness. We become more and more disconnected from the real, an analogy for the war as a whole. With cinematography by Vittorio Storaro, colour played a large role in Apocalypse Now. Various hues of smoke waft through the scenes, spotlights dance through the night, and the suffocating warmth of the jungle is shown in the deep yellow lighting of the delta. This world is chaos incarnate, choreographed to the spectral sounds of Carmine Coppola's synthetic soundtrack. We are not just in the depth of the jungle. Apocalypse Now is in a different realm altogether.
Do you know who's in command here?
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now progresses through a very act-based structure, hitting salient checkpoints as the film works towards its climax. All the while there's an overtonal progression as the film moves onwards. There is the sequence with the platoon of Kilgore, the segment at the USO show, and the Do Long Bridge segment until we reach the heart of Colonel Kurtz. The film very clearly asks us to measure the sequences against one another, as the deterioration of our character's psyche mirrors the world around them. The characters feel distinctly separate to the worlds they encounter, all the while the powerful influence these worlds possess will undoubtedly occupy some part of our characters' souls. We're like wanderers, drifting through lands, observing what has already been and what cannot be undone. Apocalypse Now truly captures the feeling of a downward spiral, as things just grow worse and worse for everyone involved. And it's precisely because of this that we have to keep going further. What truly lies at the depth of a man's soul.
You're neither. You're an errand boy, sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill.
The film is an intense sensorial depiction of psychological decay and dehumanization that occurs during war. The world we see in Apocalypse Now is what one may imagine at the end of time, resorting back to our primitive nature wherein only the mighty can rule. And this is where Colonel Kurtz comes in. The radical views that Kurtz holds true are frighteningly prophetic, and Marlon Brando's portrayal carries such immense weight, and yet Kurtz is the only character we encounter that seems to speak the truth. In all of this disorder, a madman reveals clarity. This is what the world has become, and this is how the world has to be led. We are not civilized, we are animals. Look at what we've done to our world. We should accept our fates. Apocalypse Now is a fully realized vision of the language of film and how art is something that's imperfect. Much of the making of Apocalypse Now came with improvisation from the characters immersing themselves in the world and seeing what rang true. And this is the result. One of the greatest films ever created, and a gaze into the face of horror. Number 9. Yi Yi, directed by Edward Yang. I came to learn about myself that when examining stories, the ones that resonate most with me are the ones that I can only describe as grand. Not grand just in the idea of a large piece or an epic, but there's something about a story that affects multiple people, that alters the very nature of a world, which I find very appealing. It's as though the story and the themes represent something greater than us, which is what I've always found so transcendental about art. And Yi Yi by Edward Yang is that kind of story. The story follows the Jian family and the personal woes of each member. The mother, the father, the daughter and the son, as well as the brother-in-law. The stories of each family member are not directly connected. However, there does exist a kind of existentialist thread between them all. The father ruminates on a lost love that he never got over from childhood. The mother deals with losing the family matriarch of the grandmother. All of their tales seem unique to themselves as they take place amongst the empty tapestry of the Taipei landscape. Yi Yi strikes a balance between the intimate and the shared, between the personal and the public. Released in 2000, Yi Yi captured, more than any other film I've seen, that bridge at the dawn of the millennium, between the end of one world and the birth of another. One where culture becomes westernized and the spaces that surround us lose all sense of history and become something so impersonal. Yi Yi focuses on people in these places. Places that we've seen before, that we recognise, that seem so familiar and yet so foreign. Our characters are dwarfed in their surroundings, their stories ultimately just a drop in the ocean of all stories that surround us. But what is it about Yi Yi that makes it a film that could be considered this good? Because it's the perfect understanding of a modern affliction. What does family mean in today's world, where we all ultimately live our own separate lives? Our characters yearn for personal connections as we watch them at different transitory stages in their lives, wherein one thing must die so that another may continue. The father must make amends with a love that can never be rekindled. The boy must end the path of childhood so he may become a man. The world is constantly changing, and though we're desperate to hold on to that world which gave us such happiness and joy, things change. People change. Edward Yang shot all of his films in his distinctive subdued style. Frames with the potential to be so loud are in fact subtle and controlled. His mastery of composition, choosing to keep the camera static for long takes, allowing the people to interact with the world around them. Yang's work is sentimental, and Yi Yi perhaps most of all. The human emotion in this film is rich and incredibly authentic, because that's what the film's about. It's about the feeling of longing for happiness. It's about the love of a family that you wish you had more of. It's a story of sadness, yet it's comforting. When I first watched Yi Yi, I knew that the way to describe it to people was not to discuss narrative, but how the film feels. Yi Yi is that feeling at 3 AM as you sit in an airport waiting for your flight. Parts of the world move with rapid pace, others are still and fast asleep. And meanwhile you watch it all in a transitory state, knowing that you're leaving one thing behind, but you'll be going somewhere new. And in the end, it will all be okay. Number 8. Seven Samurai, directed by Akira Kurosawa. When it comes to which film has had the largest direct influence on the rest of cinema from this list, I may have to put my money on Kurosawa's greatest film, Seven Samurai. Action and adventure cinema to this day still uses the storytelling devices, many of which were developed by this film. The idea of a group of heroes banding together, finding one another before they set out on a journey. The story of 7 samurai recruited to defend a village from bandits. It's exactly how you imagine it to be, and it's perfect. As I mentioned earlier, if you've seen Star Wars, you've seen a lot of the Searchers. But if you've seen Seven Samurai, you've seen nearly every adventure film ever made. Seven Samurai was Kurosawa's longest and most intricately designed film. When it comes to the filming itself, Kurosawa was known to create detailed storyboards of his work. But in Seven Samurai, he was to undertake sequences and styles of shooting that hadn't even been considered up until then. The final battle sequence is the film's most dramatic and most spectacular moment. Kurosawa's use of telephoto cameras bring a dynamism to his images. He follows people as they run and move as backgrounds fly past behind them. The entire sequence was explained to the crew in diagrams and measured down to the letter. You can even count how many bandits are attacking the village throughout the film and how many are left. That's how precise his directing was. The film grabs your attention with the introduction of each of the Ronin, and throughout the film you legitimately care for their troop. But there is one member that steals the show. It's of course Toshiro Mifune. The charm and charisma of this man oozes throughout the film. He's wild, funny, and just as much a hero as the rest. Every facet of Seven Samurai has to be analysed, because cinema of today owes so much to it. And much like The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, this is a film which is a blockbuster. It's pure entertainment that's so expertly crafted. Nothing about the film feels of a certain time or dated. Its pacing, its structure, leave the audience genuinely invested as to what's about to happen. Some of the action scenes are so subdued and quiet compared to how we anticipate an action film to present itself, and yet there's a layer of tension that makes each sequence memorable, building more and more toward the ultimate climax. Kurosawa made many types of films, but what he was most identified as was a samurai director, the filmmaker that makes the epic kind of films. And although not completely true, Seven Samurai is one of those epic films. His use of harsh weather, his loud triumphant score, his revolutionary development of filmmaking techniques, everything about Seven Samurai is large and enthralling. Modern cinema has taken so much from Seven Samurai, but they lack something. Their beats are all the same, but they don't possess that same soul. Whereas many action heroes of now are exactly that, the archetype, the heroes of Seven Samurai were people. They were genuine characters, and they did what they did to help others. Amidst the fighting and heroism lies the story of the resilience of the human spirit. And as a perfect segue, and as I may not have another reason to mention this, perhaps my favourite Seven Samurai piece of trivia is that after a screening of Solaris, Tarkovsky and Kurosawa were in a bar together, and as neither could speak one another's language, Tarkovsky began to scream the Seven Samurai theme at the top of his lungs, to which Kurosawa joined in. And if it's good enough for Tarkovsky, then it's good enough for me. Number 7, Andrei Rublev, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. Although it didn't possess the immense weight of the Tarkovsky touch that would be present in his later films, the dreamlike setting of Mirror, or the grand inertia of Stalker, Andrei Rublev remains the birth of the true Tarkovsky style, and in my belief, the greatest piece he ever created. Set in medieval Russia, we follow fresco painter Andrei Rublev across 8 chapters, each signifying a distinct moment in either his life or the history of Russia from the Tatar invasion, and examining pre-Tsarist Russia. Although a biographical film, the structure of Andrei Rublev is not to show the life of the man. In fact, large sequences of the film completely exclude him, and in the final third, our nominal character takes a vow of silence, becoming the ultimate voyeur of the events that surround him. So then why make him the focus of the story? The film opens on what may be the most startling introduction to a film ever made. An unnamed man attempts to fly over a field. We see his POV as he begins to ascend and look down upon his doubters below, before he crashes into the hillside.
Лечу! Архип!
This sequence, never to be mentioned, sets what kind of story Andrei Rublev is telling. For a brief moment we identify with this man, we become him, we experience his being before he's discarded. Tarkovsky wants us to remove any semblance of the intellectual when dealing with certain criteria of art and focus solely on the inner. Andrei Rublev is a film about these kinds of associations. Cause and effect is not at play here. The chapters show no distinct progression or even relation to one another. Andrei discusses faith, the nature of being an artist, and before we know it, we're greeted with a sequence reenacting the crucifixion of Jesus. Andrei Rublev is an episodic film that attempts to achieve some kind of symbiosis with the workings of its titular character. Andrei Rublev the man is used as a representation for all of what Russia was and what it would become. It explains why he encounters the varying entities of Russian society without ever being directly involved. He is, in essence, the spirit of all of Russia, a being omnipresent.
Скажу только, что там совсем не так, как вы все тут думаете. Русь, Русь. Всё-то она родная терпит.
Tarkovsky never followed the traditional logic of filmmaking. His admiration for landscapes, both natural and spiritual, would become what would typify his work. And it's this realm of the internal, of one's relation with the world around them in transcendental means, that was birthed in Andrei Rublev. Snow falls from indoors, fires blaze all around. The world is powerful, much more than we. And Tarkovsky shoots the world of 15th century Russia to display its awe-inspiring power. Backgrounds extend beyond the horizon, as characters communicate with these worlds in the foreground. The balance of human and environment is so strong here, we're constantly reminded that the world is as important as the inhabitants. And this is a world that's shot so beautifully and otherworldly that it's hard to believe that it's the same planet as ours. Perhaps Tarkovsky wanted to show that the medieval world was precisely that. But what I find the most interesting aspect about Andrei Rublev is that it does possess a narrative, a tenuous one, but there is story at play here, and yet most of the real goings-on of Andrei Rublev are unknown. Tarkovsky knowingly used a subject in which no one knows much about. The world and events that Tarkovsky creates, the large-scale assault on the church, these were all from the imagination of Tarkovsky. Every sequence has a chapter completely dedicated to it, yet they are all essentially fictional, though the tapestry as a whole is a necessity to understand the enigmatic world that was early Russia. Tarkovsky curated the life of Andrei Rublev, whether it happened or not, but the work of Tarkovsky was a dreamscape, and people only exist in the minds of those living. Whatever Andrei Rublev was in his real life, he's made more real by the mythical portrayal of Tarkovsky's vision.
Сам же всегда говоришь, про что думаешь.
Так что же мне? Я человек мирской, свободный.
Number 6, Spirited Away, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. It has to be the greatest animation that's ever been made. A story of a young girl trapped in a bathhouse for spirits and finding a way to escape is not just a feast for the eyes, it's one of the most beautiful stories ever envisioned about a child trying to find their way in the world. Miyazaki has always been in tune with the emotional turbulence of children and the insight that that brings. Chihiro is the main character of Spirited Away, and she possesses an innocence, but that doesn't mean that she has complete purity. She is stubborn and petty and childish, and is surrounded by a world of mysterious and strange creatures, some of which are threatening, and some of which are just there. But we're in a world we cannot comprehend, and one we cannot control. Influenced greatly by Japanese folklore and tales of the yokai, having an understanding of Japanese mythology will greatly enhance your viewing experience of Spirited Away, but it's a film that possesses so much originality that it could be the first film you've ever seen and you'll still be dazzled by its astonishing sensibilities. From the film's opening, we see a young girl like so many we've seen before, so upset that she's doing something she doesn't want to, and in a matter of minutes, the transition from reality to the spirit world is a piece of genius, as the adventure unfolds in front of our eyes and we're cascaded into one of the most amazing worlds in the history of human imagination. Chihiro encounters a multitude of characters, all trying to find their place in the spirit world, perhaps the most impactful and memorable of these characters being No-Face, the avaricious and tempting spirit that is as terrifying as he is misunderstood. Chihiro's traversal of this world is filled with scene after scene of excitement. Dragons fly through the air, and giant heads bounce around the gilded room of a witch. And yet the emotional purging that Spirited Away holds in spades is a very Ozuian style, silent scenes of contemplation on the peaceful vista of an endless ocean. A girl and her spirit friend take a journey on a train in what is one of the most serene and thoughtful moments of the entire film. There are a number of interpretations for Spirited Away, its navigation of traditional Japanese stories, its allegories for the struggle of many modern children. However, I see it as a story of growth. Chihiro reconciles with her own identity, her own flaws of being a child. It's who she is, and as of now the world is scary and full of monsters. In a way it always will be, but that innocent gaze that she possesses is the only way to maneuver through this world. In search of her own name, she must ensure that she never lets go of this. She can never return to a time before that innocence was challenged and put to the test, but if she's strong, she can keep hold of it and always keep it with her. A beautiful, magical story, which some people say is more than animation, but no, this is pure animation, and that is cinema. Number 5. Fanny and Alexander, directed by Ingmar Bergman. Bergman's final masterpiece was to be his crowning achievement, his most autobiographical film, taking direct inspiration from his own upbringing. Fanny and Alexander follows its two titular siblings and the transition from the happiness of their luxurious family manor to the sterile and inhospitable lodging of their new father figure, an authoritarian clergyman.
Du förstår väl att jag har straffat dig av kärlek?
Ja!
Kyss min hand, Alexander.
Får jag lägga mig nu?
Fanny and Alexander exists in the same vein as I described Yi Yi. It's a family drama that exists on a grand scale. The set design and art direction of the film is already stunning. The contrast of the luscious reds make the sterile white walls of the latter half truly hit with an icy touch. But to have all of this shot once more by Bergman's longtime collaborator Sven Nykvist elevates the imagery to sublime new levels. Where Fanny and Alexander differs from many other family dramas is that Bergman is at the helm, and although his philosophical style permeated much of his middle era of filmmaking, here his touch of magical realism adds another layer of depth to this already rich film.
En oformlig brinnande gestalt rör sig över golvet, skrikande.
Jag vill inte. Släpp mig. Släpp mig.
You're deeply invested in the goings-on of this large, extended family. As drama ensues between the members, there's jealousy between the aristocratic and worker classes of the household, and affairs seem to be just one of the many secrets that are hidden in its walls. The family feels as alive as the characters from a Tolstoy novel, but Bergman adds that otherworldly nature to the story, as though in order for our characters to truly grow, they must reconcile themselves with the spiritual connection that binds them all. The encounters of family members that have passed stay with us, and we must carry on their legacy. Like many of these tapestry-esque epics, however, Fanny and Alexander is still ultimately about family. It exists amongst the greatest art pieces that explore less of the meaning of existence on a metaphysical scale and how to exist with those people whom you share the most intimate bonds with. What does it mean to traverse life's most troubling tribulations with your family? One of the great explorations of one of the great questions, what does family mean?
Vi ska leva i det lilla. I den lilla världen. Den ska vi hålla oss till. Och den ska vi odla och göra det bästa av.
Regardless of what happens throughout Fanny and Alexander, the sequences that we see of truly deep love is that reminder of the tenderness that only the love of a family can evoke. One that may be flawed and whose relations are all over the place, but they are still the people that can give us the most joy, the greatest memories. And just to see the beauty of a family that loves one another, that has to go through so much, is perhaps enough for this to convey just how brilliant and how beautiful a piece of art Fanny and Alexander truly is.
Där kommer min familj.
Number 4. The Lord of the Rings trilogy, directed by Peter Jackson. The most popular film I'm going to include on this list. What more can be said about the Lord of the Rings trilogy? In all of cinema, we've never seen a spectacle and a labour of love of this scale, and it may never be replicated. When the Lord of the Rings films were being released, they exploded into popular culture. All of a sudden the fantasy genre had struck the mainstream like never before. But what did we expect? The Lord of the Rings novels were perceived as almost unfilmable feats, The only way to film them was to make the story at least 10 hours long, give it the budget of a major blockbuster, and have a team of expert craftsmen that are not only perfect in their roles, but have a deep passion and understanding of the source material. And even watching it today, I still can't believe that they actually did it. It might be fair to say that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the most impressive achievement ever put on celluloid. The expansive lore that Tolkien created in his books was not toned down for viewers. In fact, it was placed at the very forefront. This Middle-earth was the magical, fantastical, and alien world that was envisioned in the novels. The language, the settings, the costumes, everything was made to bring that source material to fruition. The films are so big, and it's precisely because of that the only way to truly analyse the films would be to devote many hours to it, because the amount of craftsmanship that went into every frame is mind-blowing. Its use of practical effects, as well as the advancements in all manner of special effects, are something to behold. Most of what we see are real people interacting with real environments, and so there's never a moment when Middle-earth feels artificial. In fact, it's the extended editions that I believe are the definitive editions of the films. You want to spend more time in these worlds. That's how fully realised they are. Designing each piece of armour to have the correct coat of arms for individual soldiers, having daily makeup for actors that would last several hours. All of the effort that went into these films was not because they needed to, it was because they wanted to. Peter Jackson and his team that worked on these films took an impossible undertaking of an esoteric world, and if there was one thing I think this trilogy has left as a legacy, it was that you don't have to appease the masses in order for a piece to be impactful. We anticipate, particularly in genre pieces, that you can't go too high concept, you can't be too of the genre. We need some reality to hold on to. But The Lord of the Rings did exactly that. It celebrated its fantasy. It relished in its opaque logic and its mystery. We as viewers were willing to suspend our disbelief. And not only were we willing, we were excited to do so. I've barely scratched the surface of what these films are, but truthfully they've become so ingrained in our collective experience that most of you probably already know this. I haven't even touched the story of the film, but it's the archetypical hero's journey, and yet in this world of orcs, wizards and elves, it's the film's humanity which makes them resonate still. Characters that reach and fight for a greater future, those that sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and one of the most powerful tales of friendship that you're likely to see. It's an indulgent, unbelievable, colossal monolith of a filmic experience. The Lord of the Rings is a celebration of everything that cinema can and should be.
Precious!
Number 3. 2001 A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. It was a difficult decision deciding which Kubrick film that I ultimately thought to be his magnum opus. Even thinking as objectively as possible still wasn't a significant enough option in separating the two films. Both are the products of a master at his absolute best, though in the end, I believe 2001 A Space Odyssey to be Kubrick's greatest achievement, if nothing more than the fact that although an adaptation much like Barry Lyndon, the very specificity of how he presents the genre of science fiction could only be displayed through the visual storytelling of cinema.
Except for a single, very powerful radio emission aimed at Jupiter, the 4-million-year-old black monolith has remained completely inert.
2001 was another genre experimentation via Kubrick and would see us, in the space of 142 minutes, travelling from the dawn of man, beyond time, to the possible final transcendental form for all of humankind. 2001 presents the potentiality for all human beings, our greatest achievements to our self-destructive nature. Kubrick links these themes through all of history on the idea of technology. The same sparks that birthed the first tool is the same ingenuity that allowed us to traverse the unknown reaches of space. It may also even be that we as a species have advanced so much we can create an object that even we can't destroy.
It's still within operational limits right now.
Yes, and it will stay that way until it fails.
Would you say we have a reliable 72 hours to failure?
Yes, that's a completely reliable figure.
Kubrick's filmography is often thought of as a very misanthropic view of mankind, and even if that were the case, 2001 stands separate from that, presenting us with a possibility for us as humans and how we may create an existence far beyond our imagination. Though it's Kubrick's imagination that's the most magnificent asset on display in 2001. The stories of Barry Lyndon's production of replicating a centuries-old era are exhausting in their authenticity. Yet in 2001, Kubrick aimed to actively portray a world that was yet to exist, and managed to do so with the same accuracy and devotion to the authentic. 2001, even in the role of technology within the arts, pushed the medium forward all of its own accord. The developments of rear screen projections, the building of giant sets to give the illusion of space travel, and countless ingenious techniques to display the majesty and mystery of the cosmic world. It's Kubrick's visual storytelling, which is why I think 2001 sets itself apart from most films. It's a very clear piece in what it aims to talk about, yet it wears its secrets on its sleeve so bravely that it becomes a film open to vast interpretations. Kubrick almost set himself a near impossible task of creating a world that required immense exposition and removed it all. The first and final 20 minutes of the film have no dialogue, and the dialogue that is used throughout is emotionless and used sparingly. We don't particularly have characters. Some may even argue that we don't even have a plot. But there's a confidence in Kubrick's loud filmmaking that you can just sense that everything in the frame is purposeful and necessary. The film is an opera, filled with dancing spaceships, the crescendo of the emerging monster, and the triumphant celebrations of ascension. This is a film that celebrates humanity and everything that we can be. "2001: A Space Odyssey" is a film that I may be inclined to call flawless. Every composition is seared into your memory. The colour and grading of the film is exactly how it's supposed to be. The searing whites of a world wherein technology has become the be-all and end-all, to the searing red light of the HAL 9000 computer. Kubrick, being the perfectionist he was rumoured on having seen an initial cut of 2001, said that the blacks of space were not black enough. The horror that's conveyed of the mysterious monolith not only signifies our innate reaction to the unknown, it's a stroke of genius by a master filmmaker, recognising the weight of the message his film carries. Everything in 2001 hits with full force, because it has to. This is a piece from an artist aiming to convey perhaps some of the most important messages you can convey in your art. Here is a glimpse of our ideal, and in the presentation of such, Kubrick is reshaping our world so that we may reach it. Number 2, Satan Tango, directed by Béla Tarr. And in what is the penultimate choice on my list, is a film that I encourage everyone to see, and yet never have the opportunity to do so. Béla Tarr's masterpiece, the devouring and earth-shattering drudge through nihilistic existence, Satan Tango. At over 7 hours long, the length of Satan Tango is understandably the first thing people discuss with the film, and it's also difficult for it not to become a distraction upon introducing the film to others, because Satan Tango is a film that crawls to its finale, through the mud and the rain that engorges its frames. The film takes place in a Hungarian village across 12 chapters. In many of the chapters, we're introduced to some inhabitants. We learn that there is some kind of conspiracy involving a sum of money that some of the villagers are intending to steal. All of this occurs in whispers, as news reaches the village that the young man by the name of Irmias is returning. The themes of Satan Tango deal with the crisis of authority that corrects others. Irmias is a character that appears as some type of deity. The villagers see him as so far above them, and he too has established this kind of hierarchy in order to con them out of their money. He's the king of the peasants, refusing to let go of the small degree of power he has so that he can control others. The villagers are too people that have become content in their own slavery. The farm that they live on possesses no joy. The people betray one another, and yet at the same time, they remain stagnant in their existence. And stagnation is the way Satan Tango's world exists. The length of Satan Tango is not just an exercise in filmmaking. The slow, almost unbearable manner in which we tread through the story is the most necessary tool at Tar's disposal. The scenes in Satan Tango can play out for minutes at a time, beyond the point of recognition, to the point we feel almost trapped in the scenes themselves. Time is the dictator of all in Satan Tango. When we move through the landscape, we do not simply see the horizon and move onwards. We walk towards it, and we continue to walk until we realise that we're getting nowhere. We move with characters for minutes at a time, only to realise we're not moving. The place where we are is suspended in time. The rain cascades and it never changes. The music loops in circles, and we slowly begin to realise that this world shall never change. It's been forgotten, nothing more than a memory. This interconnects with Tar's filmic decision-making, with the structure of the film taking the shape of a tango. There are 6 chapters that move forward and 6 chapters that move backward, culminating in a full circle. Satan Tango is not a happy film, it's the antithesis of a happy film. Shot in black and white, its characters carry a hatred, visions of the only path to follow being one that annihilates all life. So why then do I consider it such a spectacular feat? Because it truly displays the capacity of what film can be. Few films are like Satan Tango. Its length of the film is never not justified. As time progresses, you realise you're in an inert world, and that stagnation only intensifies over time. The landscape, the weather, the movement, it all transposes into something we start to dread. You as a viewer begin to literally feel the immensity of this world, to show with such stark nature the reality of people's lives and how they can be victimised, only to then continue the cycle of injustice against one another, is a fascinating setting. Satan Tango is a film to be experienced, to be pondered over and deciphered. A film that may alter your perspective on what a film is. It may confuse or enrage you. However, that emotional turmoil you find yourself in is one that coincides with the piece itself. Not all art is supposed to be enjoyed, and art is seldom perfect. It's often those imperfections that make it the highest echelons of humanity. And in the realm of cinema, it's harder to find a more impactful piece than Satan Tango.
Azt is tudta, hogy nincs egyedül, hiszen minden és mindenki, apja odafönt, anyja, a testvérei, a doktor, a macska, ezek az akácfák, ez a sáros út, ez az ég, ez az éjszaka idelen függ tőle. Mint ahogyan ő is szinte csüng mindenen.
Number 1, The Godfather, Part 1 and Part 2, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And so, I cheated. I put 2 films as my number 1 spot, and it may even be the 2 most obvious picks I could choose for the greatest film of all time. But I would also be lying to myself if I didn't put The Godfather 1 and 2 as the greatest film of all time. When I thought about what was to be my number 1 pick, I had to think of a film that I could never grow tired of, a film that even in discussing it, I still get excited to this day, and a film whose mastery of the form still stands the test of time. And there was no other choice. In what may still be the greatest piece of mainstream popular culture, The Godfather is what everyone wants cinema to be. It seems to be the one film that everyone agrees on, not just that it's really good, but that it's in a tier of its own.
Michael, is it true?
Don't ask me about my business, Kate.
Is it true?
Don't ask me about my business.
No!
And when discussing a film of that caliber, what else more can be said about it that hasn't been said before? And I'm using the singular term of film because I do consider Part 1 and 2 of The Godfather to be a singular piece. At its heart, it's a simple tale. The rise from nothing and the tragedies that befall one immigrant family in America. When analysing each aspect of The Godfather, every element has become a template for what a film is supposed to be. Adapted from Mario Puzo's novel, the screenplay written by Coppola and Puzo himself is a sweeping, exciting and epic tapestry of 20th century America.
Et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Just the screenplay alone features everything that you could think of to make a perfect story. It has the formalistic structure of 3 acts, the inciting incident, but at the same time still has a creativity within the form. The breakaway sections, such as the sequence of the horse's head, jumping backwards in time, all elements that serve to enrich some of the greatest characters that will ever exist in the medium. For if you strip away everything else from The Godfather, what you're left with are rich, complex characters, and that is the heart of the film.
Come on, Frankie, you know my father did business with Hyman Roth. He respected him.
Your father did business with Hyman Roth. Your father respected Hyman Roth, but your father never trusted Hyman Roth.
The film grain and murmured talks in darkened rooms flood the film with atmosphere. Nino Rota's beautiful score never allows us to forget the tragic tale we're witnessing, and every performance is a career best from what are already some of the greatest actors to ever have featured in film. But beyond all of that, The Godfather is about character. The growth of the Honourable Vito Corleone, who lives his life in service to no one other than his family, whom he has undying devotion to, and his children, Santino, a volatile and charismatic hothead, Fredo, the awkward weak link of the boys, Tom Hagen, an orphan that was brought into the family as a young boy, and of course, Michael Corleone, a character that should be seen as cinema's answer to Hamlet. A character with such depth, with such enigma, with such tragedy that befalls him to undergo the most awe-inspiring transformation.
Mike, you don't come to Las Vegas and talk to a man like Mo Green like that!
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Michael Corleone is the centerpiece of The Godfather, although it just happens to help that every single moment from every other person around him is, for lack of a better term, perfect. I've never seen a film that is in equal parts so consistently enthralling, philosophical, exciting and thought-provoking. Every sequence is an icon of the form. The dinner sequence between Sollozzo, Michael and McCluskey is a template for how to direct tension in a scene. The presence of Hyman Roth and how he turns a dying man into such a powerful figure. Every moment is ingrained in my memory, and I'm not the only one. From film theorists to the average cinema watcher, The Godfather is special. It's our Shakespearean tragedy. It's the pinnacle of the art form. It's the greatest film of all time.
They might like a story like that.
They might. They just might.
It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.